Have you been drawing your whole life and you've been thinking about making a career out of it? But the adults in your life and maybe some of your peers have been dismissive or just outright condescending about it? But it's okay because once you become an art major and you're surrounded by adults and peers that think the same way you do and have the same passions as you, then everything will be worth it. Let me take a rain check on answering that. I do have a quick disclaimer though. These are based on my own personal experiences and they aren't necessarily a blueprint for everyone else's experiences. For context, I attended university in the Philippines for about 2 years before I dropped out and moved here to the US and went to community college as an art major. My personal academic plan and the classes I took were geared towards transferring primarily to Cal State Long Beach for a BFA in illustration and animation. My education did take some twists and turns, so if you're curious about it, let me know in the comments down below, and I might make a future video out of it. But now to get to the point you've been waiting for, welcome to Elscapades, and today I want to talk about the 5 harsh realities of being an art major that killed my creativity and the one time it didn't. First is busy work, and I'm talking about doing repetitive tasks but not getting or barely getting to the real application of the subject. Imagine taking a calligraphy class and only practicing the letters, but you never even write a whole sentence or even a whole word by the end of it. Would you count that as productive? Yes, there's a lot of background and prep work that goes into making art. And generally it is better to walk before you can run and all that, but I'm talking about months wasted on just busy work. The worst offender in my own personal experience was my web design class, which I was very excited for. I was actually thinking about going into that field and using my illustration background as a way to stand out. But given that this is the first point in my video, you can tell it was a massive disappointment. That's a whole video rant on its own, but that's not what I'm talking about today. Both the 3-hour studio class that we sat through and our homework was mostly dedicated towards busy work, where we just essentially showed off how good we were at copying codes from the book. We spent way too long changing line thickness on tables and the colors of tables, the inside, the outline of the table. We spent way too long just changing properties on that table, whether it was a line width or color. I had this class in 2017, and outside of academic websites, I haven't even seen websites that had tables. I'm sure there's websites that actually use a lot of tables out there, but that's not really what I was expecting out of that class. We were just working on bits and pieces here that never really came towards a satisfying conclusion at the end of it. Second reality of being an art major that killed my creativity is bad project pacing. And that includes both being too fast and being too slow. The web design class I previously mentioned, yeah, that's also an example of bad lesson pacing, and that was because it was too slow going. That makes it a double offender so far. However, the opposite, which is going too fast on a project, is also bad news for creativity. When I say too fast, I'm not talking about procrastinating until the week before or even the night before the deadline. Although not gonna lie, I have been guilty of that too. What I'm talking about here though is how some classes or even some professors expect you to just crank out the artwork. You realize that they're very specifically looking for quantity over quality. I realized later on that this was about filling a quota more than anything. They just wanted to be able to say that they had an X amount of number of projects for this class. It wasn't about getting better because there was no feedback on how we could improve our quality of work or even industry shortcuts that we could use to go faster. Even if it was badly done, I realized I was being graded on being on time instead of submitting quality work. The sad thing is bad project pacing or just bad time management extends beyond school. It applies to work where some clients will have high expectations of good quality work for a very short amount of time. In a way, it does give students a preview of what it can be like at work, but it is still very discouraging to submit your work week after week to the same professor and watch them grade your work and your classmates' work with a dead look in their eyes. Maybe they decided cramming in as much work as they could in a semester was the best idea, or maybe it was dictated to them by someone else higher up. But it doesn't change the fact that it left a bad taste in my mouth that made me actually think about quitting on art, and I'm not just talking about as a career, but just overall. Third harsh reality of being an art major is bad teachers. And I'm not just talking about how they rank and rate my professor, because I've actually had really good ones that had very low ratings. Fun fact, it took me actually about 2 years, maybe three, to realize that the chili pepper icon was literally about the professor's hotness, as in their attractiveness. In my defense, I was very task oriented while I was doing that, and so the chili pepper just it didn't add up and it wasn't contributing anything, and so my mind just kind of glossed over that. When I say bad teachers, I'm talking about just complete and utter apathy, whether it was for their subjects or for their students or both. They were just there for a paycheck and it showed because they just did the bare minimum, if that. For whatever reason, they just didn't have it in them to do a good enough job, and so showing up and going through the motions would just have to do. It's hard enough for students to be excited about class, no matter how passionate you are, because at the end of the day, it is still a class and there's still standardized criteria you have to meet and be graded on at the end of the day. But it's even harder when the professor obviously doesn't care. I've shown up to morning classes where the lecture portion of our 3-hour class was watching someone else's YouTube videos. It wasn't even the professor's own YouTube channel or anything. They just found a tutorial online and threw that up on the screen, and that's what we had to follow. I would understand if the video came from a platform where they had to pay a subscription for it, because yes, as students, it's harder for us to gain access, and for them, it's a lot more cost efficient to pay for that subscription, but they show that to 3 classes, maybe 4 or 5 others. Also, most importantly, I hope that they would be using it as a supplement for their own lectures instead of the main lecture in itself. Sure, the class didn't start that early, but at the same time, it was the principle of the thing. Not to mention, instead of giving me the option of just doing this at home, you made me show up here and put on pants for this. Fourth is subjective grading, and yes, even good professors can be guilty of this. I don't know about you, but I've had at least one professor who was okay, decent at their job, and pretty decent teacher. But when some of the students got to comparing their work and the grades they got for it, there was a bit of a discrepancy, shall we say. It wasn't a huge discrepancy, but it was enough to make us raise our eyebrows and for some of us to start asking older students. We found out that it was a semi-open secret that this professor played favorites and was very light-handed with their ace when it came to students that they liked or styles that they liked. What I learned is at the end of the day, teaching is still a job, and even good professors might give you a grade that you don't necessarily deserve, whether it's for political or personal reasons. Whether it's a bad grade that might not reflect your fulfillment of the project's objective, or it's a good grade that you may not entirely have earned. Sometimes the people you expect to be encouraging aren't, whether it's through apathy, jealousy, or spite. I will acknowledge that yes, art is very subjective, but I do want to counter that grading shouldn't be. And it's hard because everyone's going to come into school at different points in their art journey. Some students come in and they've been drawing their entire lives, and some might have just randomly decided to be an art major even though they can't draw. The best way I've seen a professor handle this is actually using the first project you submit as a baseline. After that, each project you submit does have higher standards to meet, and it should address what was lacking in your previous work. That's why I do have a lot of respect for that professor, because I know that the more students and classes that you have, the harder that gets. The fifth and last reality of being an art major that actually killed my creativity was project prompts. This came as a surprise to me, and I didn't actually realize there was a problem for an embarrassingly long time. In my early years of being an art major, I would still draw or design in between semesters just for myself or just for fun, but eventually it became less and less. I didn't even realize there was a problem until a couple semesters away from graduating, and I realized I haven't been drawing for fun lately, and I haven't been feeling like it. After thinking through that, I kind of realized what the problem was, which was I forgot how to. I got too used to the idea of someone else, whether it was professors, clients, Inktober, telling me what to do, how to do it, and what it needs to be. So after a while, I just forgot how to come up with my own initiative and find my own inspiration to do artwork for myself or for fun. Now, if a friend or a situation popped up and there was a need, I could still perform, I could still draw, I can still design, I can still do something artistic. And I'd like to think I delivered at least pretty decent work. But that was the thing. I got too used to being creative in response to a need or a problem like homework, And so I just forgot how to do it on my own for fun. I was only reacting as opposed to acting, I suppose you could say. So after my last class in spring 2019 and designing everything that can be designed for my wedding also around spring 2019, just kind of stopped. There was simply no desire, motivation, or inspiration to be found in me. And so I just stopped doing art for a disturbingly long time. Okay, but the one time that the reality of being an art major didn't kill my creativity, but actually nurtured it instead. This is going to sound deceptively simple, but it was devastatingly effective, and it was being seen. Or more accurately, I suppose, is being acknowledged. Whether it was by at least one professor that I admire or respect, a family member, a friend, or my significant other, hearing them acknowledge the effort that I've been putting in has really been healing. Don't underestimate the impact of being acknowledged, even if it's just by one, and this is important, by the way, one person that you have a significant connection with. Notice how in those 5 realities of being an art major that killed my creativity, I didn't mention strangers' opinions. That's because it really shouldn't matter, and thankfully I already had the mindset that I wasn't going to let strangers' opinions of my life choices affect me negatively. But just as those strangers' negative opinion didn't affect me, their praise didn't really help either. I'm thinking Instagram in particular here, where likes, praise, and even positive comments didn't really enrich my life in a significant way. Sure, the likes and the positive comments on my artwork is always nice and welcome, but they didn't add value to me personally. Plus, they could just be bots for all I know. But in all seriousness, having the acknowledgement, not to mention the encouragement of the people closest to me, is a lot more empowering than I can express. To me, it was worth a lot more than the number of likes I could get on Instagram, YouTube, or any other social media. Yes, there's probably more than 5 harsh realities of being an art major that killed my creativity, and a lot more that I didn't get to mention in this video, but the important part is that it didn't stay dead. And a lot of that is thanks to the acknowledgement of people that I loved, trusted, or at least whose opinions I highly valued. As cheesy as it sounds, they believed in me when I didn't have it in me to believe in myself, and that got me through a lot worse than just pressures from school. In conclusion, I'm not saying that being an art major is a lot harder than other paths, because that does depend heavily on your own skill set, your mindset, and your community, and a lot of other factors. I will say, I do feel that there's a lot more societal pressure against it. The answer to whether it's worth it or not to become an art major depends on each individual person's circumstances and the choices that they make in the face of that. Yes, it's a bit of a cop-out, but at the same time, I'm a talking head, and you probably shouldn't base major life decisions based on one person's experiences. Do your research. Find or build a support group of family, friends, and a mostly non-toxic online community, if you can. I'm not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't go the route of being an art major. Not yet, anyway. I made this video with a hope that other artists might be better prepared or at least better equipped than I was. Because there will be times that your creativity will be challenged, take a hit, or outright killed. And the important part is that it doesn't stay dead. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and comment necromancy down below. I will see you all in the next video. Bye! Imagine taking a calligraphy. Generally, it's better to run before you work week after week to the same professor, and I don't know about you, but I've had, okay,